welcome back to Hope Beyond the Broken. I am Damaris,
And I'm Sarai.
and we're so happy that you guys are joining us again today. And today we're going to be talking about a little bit of a sticky, topic for some people. I think that when you come on the other side, it's not tricky anymore
Yeah.
because you've come on the other side.
Mhm.
But in certain circles like church, ministry, communities like that, sometimes people don't talk about certain things. And so it's not to bash anything or anything like that. It's just our personal experience of things that we've gone through and how we've come out on the other side of that.
Yes. Yes. Like she said, it could be a little sticky.
Yeah,
But-
and our hesitation is because we want people to understand is that it is a good conversation to have, but a lot of times people stay away from it because you want to still honor. And yes, you can still honor your pastors, you can still honor ministries and things like that, but the truth is the truth,
you
right?
can be the honesty.
You can still be honest. And but the greatest thing is, how do you get out of that and how do you come on the other side of
Exactly.
that,
Exactly. Yep. So my question to you was enjoying pain while in a ministry.
Yeah.
How did you cope with pain, with
With every
situations
situation
while being in ministry?
while being in ministry. I think um like I said, everybody's story is different. Even though we were all in the same house, I was the oldest, and I was in the ministry longer than you guys. At some point, I think that we've talked about it before, where we started from scratch, and it was a beautiful thing. Ministry is a beautiful thing. However, how we manage ministry, because in that we need wisdom, right? We need accountability, we need wisdom, we need all these things. And I think that sometimes after a while, it becomes very legalistic versus being more about the word.
Religious.
And it becomes very religious versus relationship.
Yeah.
And so one of the more difficult situations that I had, because I can give you different aspects, because I've gone through different things at different stages of my life. When I was younger, under the age of 18, and after the age of 18. But I think when I was full throttle in ministry, in my teenage years, I started suffering from depression really bad. But at that time, nobody talked about depression or anything like
mental
that,
health,
or
nothing, none of
mental
that.
health or anything. And so when we were laughing on our previous pods about me being quiet at times, that wasn't because I was a quiet kid. That was because I was battling depression. And my way of battling depression is to shut down. I will shut down, and if you let me, I will sleep for days. I don't communicate effectively. I'm closed off. But at the time, I didn't know that it was depression. I didn't know that not only was it depression, but there was a lot of spiritual warfare going.
Right.
I think that at the time, I think that was the height of our ministry where we were singing. At that point, I had recorded my first EP with my mom. We were traveling to record. I was exposed to a lot of things since I was young that nobody knew about, that I think set me up for my teenage years. And because a lot of the times in ministry, all you see is what is in the front, you don't see what's behind the curtain. You're supposed to present yourself a certain way. But being a pastor's kid, you do not have a lot of outlets to talk. And so that's why it's very important that pastors that have young children cultivate a healthy environment in which the right people have access to your children, where your children feel safe. Because even if you think your child is my bestie and all of these things, you're still their parent and they're not going to tell you everything. I thought I had the closest and sweetest relationship with my mom. However, I never told her the stuff that I went through. My mom passed away not knowing half of the trauma that I had been through because I never told her. Was it to probably to so she wouldn't be hurt and be like, oh, take the responsibility. Oh my God, I wasn't able to protect my child, or I couldn't do anything about it if I knew I could do something about it. So I'm saying that because I'm not pointing blame to nobody on how things were handled. However, this is more of a cautionary thing. Going forward, if you made a mistake before, try to work to change that, right? And I think that if my parents were here, now that we're more grown up, I think I would have had these conversations. They've passed on now 20 years. I was 28, almost 30 when they passed away. So I would have had these candid conversations with them. And I think that we probably, a lot of my parents would have changed in certain ways, how they manage certain things in church. However, back then in the 80s and 90s, it was very fanatical. It was very, they had to make a point. You know what I'm saying? And everything was so drastic and so dramatic. However, when I was growing up, it was the time, let's say, between the ages of 15 and 19, which was the 90s, the early 90s. There was this big swarm of kids getting pregnant out of wedlock, outside of the church. Like, it was a real big thing that kids, 14, 15-year-old were getting pregnant. Like, it was a lot of kids around that time that were getting pregnant. However, in our church, we were being very sheltered. In church, people didn't talk about sex. It was a taboo to talk about sex, about sexuality. It was, all of those things were taboo.
Even in our home.
Even in our home, there wasn't a lot of conversations. I don't remember ever having a conversation about that. How a guy's supposed to treat you. How is this? A lot of the conversations that we have with our children, our nieces and nephews, do not compare to none of the conversations we had. And I think at that time, sometimes people thought that if I don't talk about it, that they won't be exposed to it, so they won't do it. I'm sorry to tell you, you're going to get exposed to it regardless, because your kids are coming outside of the home. And now it's even worse because you have social media and you have so many more people have access to your kids. And they have access to a lot of things. So they're going to get to these things sooner than 15, 19 years old. They're going to get to it at 7, 8 years old because they're that young. And a lot of things are so perverted now online that it can get there. And so we have to understand that the devil's going to try to take out your kid at a very young age. And that's my story. My first incident was at 5. You know what I'm saying? Where it was like, I'm going to finish her off now because I can't let her get to this place. And so, but I didn't know none of that because I never told anybody. I kept it all to myself. So now in my teenage years, 15, 19 years old, I'm in high school and everything like that. I'm being exposed to different things that I should not be exposed to, but nobody's talking to me about how to protect myself, emotionally, spiritually, my body, my mind. And with nobody talking to me and speaking life into me and telling me how a young girl should be, other than abstinence. That's all I was told. Abstinence, abstinence, abstinence. 1. 2, the image of the family, the ministry. We got to be very careful, these things. And we were so sheltered that I think that they thought that they were doing the best that they can do. And they did the best that they could do. I think they had all good intentions. They really did. Because our parents loved us a lot. We were their miracle, so they loved us a lot. However, I think that me having my own personal struggles and going through depression
and not speaking because you
and
were
not talking to nobody and telling people what was going down, my self-worth was minimal. Like, I was to the point of having suicidal thoughts at the age of 15. I attempted when I was like about 17 suicide, and just those thoughts like that were constantly in my head. But this is the whole thing. These thoughts are happening, but on Sunday, I'm still getting in front and I'm still singing. Still on Sunday, if I have to give a word, I'm still giving it. If I have to pray for somebody, I'm still doing that. And so I see it more now where people are more aware of it. So they're giving those assistance to their people in their church and their ministry. being more aware of like your everyday life, your mental state and stuff like that. But back then that wasn't a lot of stuff that was, if you were showing fruit, then you were able to participate in different ministries and stuff like that. And so to me, it was a couple of things. One, I showed fruit, at least my gifts. I was able to work in my gift a lot and not all the time under anointing. And then there was times that it was anointing because it's God and he's not going to be lied on. You know what I'm saying? He's going to back up his word. So there was a little bit of everything going on, but the depression was really real. And at the time, I was 19. There was a family that came to the church, and I was in such a depressive state the last year of my high school. I felt like a robot, and I didn't realize that I would feel like a robot, like I was living, looking from outside in for almost 4 years after that. Like I want to say from 18 to 23, 24, I felt like I was an outsider looking in. Like I had no control, or I had given up on my life, that I just didn't have any thoughts of how do I prevent this from happening? I should think twice before I do this. None of those concepts were come. I had just given up. I'm like, whatever happens, happens. Like if something happens to me, something happens to me. If I die, I die.
You didn't care.
I didn't care about nothing because I just was just so gone within me emotionally. And then when you're like that, you're absent of mind when it comes to what God has for you and speaking all these things. It becomes almost a second nature for you. It becomes an act. You really are acting your part, right? As a leader, you're acting your part as a good child. You're acting your part as a good employee. You're acting. So people don't understand that you are broken and sad and depressed and don't have any answers, and you feel like you're going to let people down because you're feeling the way that you're feeling, because everybody's doing so good for you and you live a good life. Because I lived a very, very good life. However, all of these internal things were happening. And so when I met, I my dad was very strict on dating. So nobody would walk up to my dad and say, "Oh, I like your daughter." That wasn't going to happen. So I think that at that time internally I was yearning some type of attention or somebody to just see me. And I met this person, and when I met this person, he was just always there. Every time I turn around, he was there. And I was like, what is going on? This person's like giving me like a lot of attention. And it wasn't like showering me with words or anything. He was just present. Every time I turned around, he was there. Every time I did something, he was there. I remember the last year of high school where I graduate, a couple of weeks before my graduation, there was somebody else's graduation, and all of the kids from our church went, and we went over there, we celebrated them, and then we went to eat and everything. 2 weeks later, that didn't happen for me. Like, it was only my family that went to my graduation, no hoopla, no nothing. And my dad was gonna go, then something happened, he couldn't go, so he ended up going to my graduation, but late. But already when I knew he wasn't gonna be able to go, that destroyed me. Like, I was like, why wouldn't my dad be here? He was at somebody else's graduation, but he has to take care of the ministry and he can't be here for my graduation. That really broke me because the person that was trying to get close to me showed up to my graduation with a fever. And so the enemy's so bad. He's like, this person came for you,
right,
and at their cost. They were sick and they came for you, but your dad could have come for you, but he didn't come. And so that lie of the enemy just started like working itself into my thought process. And so that person just kept coming up and coming up and showing up at my job, showing up to school, just showing up everywhere. So even at times when I don't want to talk to you, or I don't think this is right or anything like that, very persistent. And so I started dating this person. He was bold enough to go talk to my dad one day, because he was trying to talk to my dad and my dad wouldn't give him the time of day. And one day he was bold enough and he went right after church and he says, I like your daughter and I would like to start dating your daughter. Well, how can we make this happen? And to me, that was like, oh my God, somebody's speaking up to me. Somebody wants to be around me. And when you're in that place when you don't even think anything good about yourself and your self-value and your mental health are so bad, and somebody comes up and is speaking on your behalf and shows you that attention and stuff like that, you're going to misconstrue it completely because there's something in you that wants that so bad.
It's feeding off of,
you know what I'm saying? Yes. And it's, and we, at the moment, even though you know it probably is not right, you don't have the defenses to do anything because you're already depleted, right? Emotionally, mentally, and stuff like that. Right. And so seeing him push, I also gave in to the relationship and everything. It was my first official relationship at the age of 19, that everybody knew about, and it was, you know, everybody knew, and we were courting or whatever you want to call that. But at whatever you want to call it, people have so many names for the same thing. You're dating, you know, you're in a relationship, you're exclusive. So many words for the same thing. And so, but then the temptation came in, right? And it's let's kiss now. Now we're gonna meet with nobody knowing that we're meeting. We no longer have chaperones when we're going to hang out. Now we're fondling each other. Now we're doing this, we're doing that. I can literally tell you today, Sarah, I was numb through the whole thing. I was numb through the whole thing. I just went with the motions. If something happened, something happened. If it didn't happen, I was not emotionally present.
You wasn't thinking
of any of the actions that I was taking. I was so bound from all of the stuff that I had been dealing with, because I started being, my first molestation was at 5. And then I had a couple of more that happened throughout the time. And carrying all of that, I didn't realize when I was very young that I broke myself up into places. You know what I'm saying? Like, my mind is not connected to my heart's not connected to my body. So my body, I'll be there, but my heart or my mind is not connected to it. And so because I wasn't like connected in those things, it got to the point that I got pregnant. And I got pregnant. I didn't tell my parents. Mind you, I'm a pastor's daughter. I'm a leader. I sing. I have a lot of responsibility in the church. We have a lot of people. We're very well known in our community at the time. And I got pregnant out of wedlock, the pastor's oldest daughter. And then that was another devastation in me, because I was like, oh my God, I really messed this up. Now, not only this, but now everything's going to be exposed. In one sitting. The next sitting, I'm like a zombie, like, okay, what am I going to do now? Like, I just, and then I didn't have nobody to talk to and say, I did this, or I feel tempted, or I didn't have nothing, no avenue to go, because I thought that anytime I said something was going to hurt somebody's feeling. I was always trying to protect everybody else's feelings and image and everything. And so when that happened, I got really sick at my job, and I worked at a hospital. So they took me from my office straight to the emergency room because I kind of passed out. And that's how my parents found out, because they called my mom and they told my mom, and she told my dad, and my dad is like, what's going on? He's like, you don't even want to go. Let me take care of this. And she came to get me. And she just asked me questions, and she was like crying and asking me questions and stuff like that. And I couldn't say nothing. I was so ashamed. That's when the seed of condemnation and shame came to me the minute I had to have the conversation with my mom. I was so ashamed, so embarrassed. I didn't know what to say. But in my heart, I knew that this was not my person. I said, okay, now I've made a mistake. Now I'm going to have to marry this person that I'm not in love with, that I don't think is good for me, because I've already seen traits that are not good. You know what I'm saying? But I had not voiced any of it. So now to voice it was like, now I'm going to have to like deal with it. Like, I'm going to have to pay the consequences of sinning against God. This is my consequence. This is my scarlet letter. Like, it was so dramatic in my brain. You know what I'm saying? At the age of 19, I was like, all of these things. And my mom prayed with me and everything. I went home. Out of my mom and my dad had the hardest time. My dad had the hardest time. And I think it's maybe because he thought I failed my child or I failed the church, whatever the case may be, because me and my dad, as time went by, it wasn't until towards the end when I started healing that I was able to like approach a lot of conversations with him. Um, and he was like, I love you, I forgive you, I understand, I'm so proud of you, um and stuff like that. But I think sometimes parents can't give from where they don't have. And my dad was lacking in the family department, what I'm saying. He wasn't raised in a place where he had a wholesome view of family in the church. No, he came from the streets, he came from a broken home, you know what I'm saying. And so my mom came from a single family home. There's so many factors out here that contribute to maybe the lack of communication or how to bring that together. Right. And so after we found out that I was pregnant and stuff like that, they had a conversation with me and they're like, hey, we're going to have to take you out of your post in ministry. And I already knew that was going to happen because I knew it had happened to somebody else before, that they strip you basically out of any responsibilities you have in the church, because when you're a leader, you're the face of the church, you represent the church. So I understood that. I wasn't surprised about that. And my mom and my dad were super supportive and super loving. And even the church was very supportive and very loving towards me. I don't think the church ever made me feel like, oh, you're a sinner, you can't, I actually felt loved in my church. However, the rules back there were different. Now, a lot of the times, if something is happening, they call you behind closed doors, you're going to step down, and people just say, so-and-so is stepping down. And depending the level of administration, people will never know why they stepped down. They'll just kind of move it over because they one, scandal, and two, because they want that person. If they're really good ministers and they're really seeking out for the well-being of their members, they want to help that member get back to where they were. And they don't want to do it by scandalizing them and doing stuff. So I get that part. And a lot of people do that now, but back then they didn't do that. Back then you had to make an example of everything. Everything was an example. And so I told my dad, I said, Dad, I don't think this relationship is going to be good for me. I've seen some traits that I don't feel safe in. I feel that this can be very detrimental. I don't think this is going to be a good relationship. And my dad told me one day, he said, Damaris, if you feel that this is not your person, I know it's going to be a hard situation, but we will back you up and we will support you. And you don't have to get married. To me, that was like, oh my God, I'm relieved I don't have to get married just because I made a mistake, because that was basically the rule, right? In church, you got pregnant, you have to get married. If you had an adultery, you had to get married. That was just the norm. And for him to tell me you don't have to, that released me. I was like, oh my God. I still feel the shame. I still felt the condemnation. I still felt all of those things, but I didn't feel it from my dad. And I felt like my dad saw me, and I felt that my dad was supporting me. And that was a big deal for me.